You're listening to IWW Radio, coming to you from Niagara Falls, Canada. And in the house today, we have Paul Adams. Paul, welcome to the show.
Way, thank you for having me.
Can you give our listeners a little insight on how you got started in this business?
Well, Mom was an artist. Dad was a musician, trumpet player. I played trumpet as a child. Fell in love with the guitar. In college, I studied ethnomusicology. Then started a business building stringed instruments for about 25 years, guitars, basses, things like that.
Cool.
Then back in 1990, I released my first album, and I did fairly well with it. So I just kept doing music was really the thing. I was just kind of had to deal with being shy.
Excellent. Okay, let's move on to the first tune, Just Such Beauty. listening to IWW Radio, coming to you from Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. And in the house today, we have Paul Adams. Paul, can you tell our listeners a little bit about how that song was born?
Well, I was creating some tracks with Elizabeth Geyer, who had flown in from Sydney, Australia. We were finishing her album called The Bridge. Mm-hmm. She came here also at the behest of Bruce Lundvall at Blue Note Records in New York. Bruce was in love with Elizabeth. She's trained as a jazz trumpeter and pianist, but really she's a singer-songwriter at heart, and she just, in playing the piano, she has a really good sense of space when not to play, as you were talking about earlier.
Yes.
And so it worked really well that we could make this meditative stuff to kind of reduce the stress that it took to do her album. And eventually I met Pravin Gadkehindi and on YouTube, yes, and asked him to participate by sending some tracks in. And I would say that the inclination is somewhat romantic as well as maybe exotic or mystical, which is real easy for me.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring that back, what you mentioned about space. And as we were talking about that, space in music is everything. I feel that, as a composer myself, is that, the space between notes is such a beauty if you really discover it. And that's what really helps me, and you, I would imagine, in regards of the, how the notes sit, how everything feels, and it creates melody and flow. Can I say it? It flows with texture and everything, and that's where it's at.
I think the better I get at this, the more I use space. David Hoffman, who is also on the album Imaginings, he spent 13 years as the arranger for Ray Charles, and he really taught me a lot about using space. Paul, be quiet. Be quiet, Paul.
Are you talking to somebody I don't know, Paul?
No, Dave, that's what Dave would say to me. He would say, Paul, be quiet. Be quiet.
All right.
Okay. Don't play as much. Okay.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next one. Inhaling Stillness by Paul Adams.
And Elizabeth Geyer.
Yes. You're listening to IWW Radio, coming to you from Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. Paul, if you can enlighten our listeners on how Inhaling Stillness was born.
Well, I was wanting to have something with a lot of space, as we mentioned earlier, with the classical guitar. I use the classical because its neck configuration is easier for my left hand. I lost a couple of fingers in an accident many years ago. So the classical is much easier for me to play in open tunings. Then I thought, let's mix this with something with Elizabeth, maybe on vocals on the back. So we were having lunch, and I said, have a listen to this. Do you hear some vocals on the back? And she says, yeah. So I just let her have at it. Yeah. And then I used that ode that I bought from Godin up in Canada, and added that on the fretless sound of it. It was really a great way to enhance the classical guitar. And so I also wanted to try to keep it artistically interesting rather than just, say meditative completely. So it was, again, a mix, an amalgam of inspirations and styles.
Excellent. How can our listeners, get a hold of your merchandise? What is your website, Paul?
pauladams.org, or you can just Google Paul Adams. I'm on Pandora and Spotify. I've got 100 million streams on Pandora, so I've been very lucky there.
Excellent.
Yeah. iTunes and all the rest of the places. Yeah. And Elizabeth Geyer. Check out Elizabeth Geyer as well.
Yes, and yes, we'd love to have her on the show also, Paul. At some point, we can talk about that. But
that'd be great.
Also, I wanted to have you back for a part 2. So
perfect.
We'll be doing a part 2 some months down the road. That way we can get some more of your material across. And as you heard, it's excellent artist, Paul. He's just put his heart and soul into this, as we can all hear. And I just wanted to thank you for being on the show today, Paul. And we're going to
thank you.
We're going to do this again.
Thank you.
You're listening to IWW Radio, coming to you from Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. Have a great day.